Who are you? What are you doing on my show?
Invading your personal digital space. Oh, wait. Wrong order. I'm Leslie. And I'm invading your personal digital space. About a book.
Is that allowed? Did we set that up ahead of time and I just forgot?
I want to say something occurred that prevented traditional avenues of recording. And I was somehow brought into the mix.
Scott is moving this week.
Hopefully he's moving all of his things. Otherwise he'll be very disappointed.
So. Yeah, I hope he takes it all with him because I'm darn sure he doesn't want to have to go back to Chicago to get something. I know there's a truck involved. I know that. So I'm presuming he's capable of loading that up, even in spite of being his injured self. Oh, wait, that's right. He hired movers to do it for him. There you go.
Oh, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Professional movers.
I'm sure it'll be fine. There's no reason to worry at all. In the meantime, since we have this book to discuss, and since you have read said book, and since I know that you can set up your recording stuff and make it work right, eventually, we've decided that yes,
I was prepared.
We've decided that you're going to help us come. Blah, 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 blah. You talk for a bit. I'm just going to sit here.
And he's drunk.
It's 9 a.m. I cannot possibly be drunk. I haven't had a head start yet.
So really, the world would just be easier for me if I was farther west than everybody because I'm a morning person. So I would happily be up at these times talking to people. But no.
Funny thing is, there's a lot of people that aren't available during these times to talk. Oh. They seem to have jobs and things, and I don't understand that at all.
I just have an oddly timed occupation.
Okay. Well, anyway, you're Leslie. You read the book, so I thought we'd bring you in to fill in because you have special skills you can apply to the reading of books.
I have eyeballs.
Yes, you have eyeballs. And you have some like specific book reading training. Is that what I understand?
I did go to school and read a lot of books, and I think my degree technically included the reading of books. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that's more than I got because I just went to school and read books.
Yeah, you're probably still better off than me.
Best I can do is a couple of library certificates that said I read a bunch of books in the summers when I was a child.
I still have my Book It badge. So I participated in that. I mean, when you like reading books, you might as well get a free pizza out of it. Come on.
Okay, what's the most books you've read in the summer?
Oh, heck if I know. I just read the books. I didn't keep count. What do you think I am, a math person?
We kept count. That's how you earned the pizza. It was by having a lot of books read.
It was like every X amount of books.
Oh, I see.
This was how that worked.
Okay, well, how many pizzas did you eat in one summer?
I don't remember. I don't remember what I had last Tuesday. And last Tuesday was 2 days ago, now that I think about it.
well, now this you've just called all your credentials into question, and I don't know what to do.
I think that's fair. Well, you knew going into this that this was going to be interesting. So,
okay.
But I have the book in front of me.
Excellent. I also have the book in front of me. That is, in fact, how I read it, with the book in front of me.
I actually spent most of my time with the book over me because I was lying down reading it, but you know.
Oh, you're one of those.
I don't sit still well. I don't have a pizza in front of me to reward myself for having read it, though, which is sad.
Oh, that does seem to be unfortunate. You should do something about that next time you do one of these book reading things.
I think you should throw a pizza party for us participating in the book reading thing.
I'll get right on that.
I'm not sure I believe you.
Everybody who can make it to my house tonight can participate in the book reading.
They won't even hear this until it's not tonight.
Not my fault.
So, Mr. Bryan.
There's literally nothing I can do about that.
What is this book, which we are to discuss today?
Well, I mean, we can talk about a lot of things here. One of the things I find interesting is the book is kind of a lie in and of itself, a hoax in and of itself.
Which I found funny on several different levels. By the way, the book we're discussing is called Hoax.
Yes. What, you didn't know that already?
Subtitled A History of Deception. I know that there has not been as much discussion on this book as there has been for previous topics in this.
No.
Are we a club?
No, because nobody wants to discuss the books I pick. I apparently have a terrible time picking books. Look, I thought to myself, this is one of them books. It's very easy to read. There's not a lot of challenge to it. You don't feel like you've missed anything out by not, reading chapter 2 or whatever.
It's a collection rather than a set story that you need to complete. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And you can read it at your leisure in whatever manner you choose, one section at a time, and not feel bad about it,
Honestly, it's a good coffee table book. Again, they're little bite-sized chunks of disappointment.
Yeah. Little bite-sized chunks of disappointment. Well, we've given that review away.
No, that's actually
I guess we
not
can move
accurate.
on to everything else now. Well, no, it is kind of accurate because okay, so all right, we need to back up just a bit here.
I tried to start
Ian Tattersall. Ian Tattersall is an anthropology guy at the American Museum of Natural History. All right. I'm not really sure how that qualifies him to have written this particular book, but he has. He's written other books and he's done other articles.
Now, did you have context for who he was before you picked this?
No.
Okay.
No.
It wasn't like you went, oh, that guy, and picked it.
I went for subject matter over authorship.
Fair enough. The subject matter on the face seems very interesting. I mean, who doesn't like to hear a good hoax story? And it's a very attractive book.
Yes, it is. It's a very attractive book. If you grew up watching the Rockford Files, or heaven forbid you're even older than that and you grew up watching things like Maverick, and what's the one? Leverage? Is that
yes.
the more modern?
That's the one that I've watched.
Yeah, Leverage. This is ostensibly a very interesting topic. It's hoaxes and cons and forgeries and all kinds of stuff.
5,000 years of fakes, forgeries, and fallacies, according to the...
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Top. I don't know what that is. It says what it says on the top of the book.
Yeah, let's discuss that 5,000 years thing. Let's deal with the first hoax. The first hoax in the books of hoaxes, which is itself a hoax.
To be fair, they did warn us in the introduction, the preface, that there was a hoax regarding the book.
Yeah, but that's not the hoax of which I am speaking at this time.
Seems fair.
I'm discussing the fact that the first chapter in this book is set 4 billion years ago. Notable for the fact that there weren't a whole lot of human people around at that time.
I think that's a fair assumption. Given the discussion of evolution that follows frequently, actually, in the book.
The premise being that that is 4 billion years ago or more is kind of when bacteria started living inside other things and whatnot, using them as their environment for growing, and then gradually things got more and more complex until all of a sudden you had people driving cars up the freeway. But it's about things like camouflage and
nest stealing
and that sort of nest stealing, all that kind of stuff. The cuckoo bird substituting eggs into the nest that everybody knows about, right?
Protective camouflage.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of that's not exactly what we're talking about in this book. At least that's not what we thought we were talking about.
When I hear the word hoax, I don't immediately think of a butterfly's wings looking like, eyeballs and scaring off predators. I'm going to be honest. I can see how technically it is a falsehood or a false representation, but that's not my first thought. And to be fair, subtitle, History of Deception. So it's not just necessarily what we would define as a hoax.
But look, hoax is in 3-inch tall, heavy black letters on the cover.
That's very true. And it kind of sets the mood.
What do you expect from a book with that on the cover? I expect hoaxes. All right. Anyway, so it starts out, and this is sort of date ordered, kind of.
There are dates. Okay. Before we get too far, I want to just address something for people who have or have not read this. Each chapter is only a handful of pages long, and it has a little chapter title, which may or may not have anything to do, obviously, with what's going on with what you're about to read.
Right.
Which chapter 2, because I flipped there, is, oh gosh, of course I picked something. Apocalypticism.
Right.
Then it's got a date, 2800 BC.
2800. Yep.
And then what I would presume would be the actual title of the chapter, which is The End of the World as We Know It.
You may now all sing that song inside your head.
I'm desperately trying not to, but it's not working. And then typically, as I said previously, this is a beautiful book. Very well organized, very well designed.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of artwork, and all of them have little blurbs about what they are. Well, I say artwork. Images and artwork.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to call a shot of a billboard artwork.
Well, but this is a letter written by Isaac Newton in which he predicted the world would end. So it's not artwork, but it is a nice image and explained. But
2060, by the way, is apparently all we have left according to Isaac Newton.
Yeah, but he's dead, so what does he know?
So get your finances in order, folks.
Oh, I found the billboard you're talking about.
Yeah. It's literally one page over. Yeah.
But so that's context. Everything about the book is slightly misleading. I don't know how intentional that was, or if it was just, since it was made in the vein of sensationalism, it was made
slightly misleading, and it has to be said, slightly disappointing.
Yeah.
Because I went into this thinking, oh, this would be great. I get, I'll read about little hoaxes and frauds and con men and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you think of all the famous hoaxes. I say all the famous, but art theft, and you think of, I know this one was the Piltdown Man, faked archaeology, faked everything. And then you think of things and you're like, well, that one didn't make, there's a giant statue buried somewhere and brought up as a stone giant, like a dead giant at some point. That book, that's not in here. I mean,
no.
Okay.
There's and I also felt like getting into this, I was going to learn a little bit about how the actual cons and fakes and things were done.
Agreed.
In like not like an instruction manual.
No, but you'd be given
but slightly more
context and I expected the same thing. I expected to learn about new exciting things that I'd not heard of, but I found that being a fan of Leverage, being a fan of GM Word of the Week, and being a fan of lore kind of spoiled this book for me. Yeah. Because I already knew a lot of it. And I'm like, okay, so we're learning about the Mona Lisas, which is, to be fair, in the show Leverage is done in an episode. Like, they talk about how that worked. They talk about how they were sold and everything. And so I'm like, oh, okay, so we're going to learn about this.
No.
And I learned almost exactly everything that I learned from the television show, the entertainment television show. Plus, technically a little bit more that I'd also recently learned because I've recently been introduced to the show Drunk History. And they covered the gentleman who stole the Mona Lisa in that show, the one that I had seen, whose name completely escapes me. But anyway, so we're all sidetracked and distracted already.
That's the name of the show there, kid.
That's fair enough. We do what it says on the tin.
That's right. You know how I learned about the 6 Mona Lisas? Well, let me put it this way. I can tell you that at least 5 of them are signed on the back by the doctor.
I just read that book. Oh my gosh. Like, not very long ago. Is that the City of Death?
That is the City of Death.
Okay, Doctor Who and the City of Death. That's Baker. A Baker doctor.
Yes. Dr. 4, the 4th Doctor, the good doctor.
One of the good doctors, excuse you.
What? No, that's not true at all.
I liked Eccleston.
Oh, well. Okay, so Doctor Who, that's where I picked it up. City of Death.
I had completely forgotten about that until you mentioned it. But again, it was very surface. On all 3 sources, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a plot device in the City of Death. It was just, Leonardo he was visited by the doctor. There are 6 canvases. The doctor signs 5 of them. Leonardo paints over them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Later on, many years later, Doctor shows up again and uses, ultraviolet light or something.
Just go read the book if you actually want to understand. It's quite enjoyable.
It's quite the thing, and it shuts down a big major plot. And anyway,
saves the world like he does.
Yes.
Spoilers.
The point being, a lot of this stuff is stuff that you have heard in other places before, and is also treated in a less thorough manner than you might have encountered before, even when they weren't treating it very thoroughly.
It's, how about I find the right word? Cursory. Does that sound good?
Yeah, very cursory. Yeah, like the chapter 4 is predetermined combat. It's about gladiators and pro wrestlers, and they make the astonishing revelation that, oh goodness me, pro wrestling's not real.
I think the point of the chapter, to be interesting and surprising, was that gladiators were potentially not real. Most people think of gladiators and they think of it's always a fight to the death and murder, and they don't think about the fact that this was a business.
Yeah.
Like every piece of entertainment ever.
I thought people were just aware of that.
Brian, darling.
What?
You are a very special person who knows a lot. I didn't know that the gladiators were fake, but I can't say I was surprised when I stopped and thought about it. Not all gladiators were fake, by the way. Certain instances. They still horribly murdered people.
Yes.
A lot.
Lots of horrible murder did occur. You don't kill off your best fighter.
No. You don't kill off the dreamy one.
You don't even risk the chance that your best fighter could be killed. If you're making your money off of him, that would be stupid. Anyway.
You would lose the crowd's favor. And then they might get restless.
Mm-hmm. But I don't... There's nothing in this book to me that says, you have read an amazing and interesting book, and gosh, good golly, we should do another one just like it.
I would actually go so far as to say, no, you don't really learn much of anything, like, not in a meaningful way. It's the same as reading, well, these are, they're not even magazine articles. They're like...
No, they're not.
They're like a step between photo set lists on the internet and a magazine article. They're somewhere between those two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a series of BuzzFeed articles.
And that tone says it all.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I think the most generally offensive thing about this book is it fails to live up to its promise. It is in and of itself a hoax in that it is not enlightening. It's maybe moderately entertaining, but overall it's very unsatisfying.
Yeah.
Because it looks to me like a textbook or a National Geographic, like something that was really well planned and well thought out, and it reads, like you said, like a BuzzFeed article.
Yeah, it's...
Which are more satisfying because you know what you're reading.
Well, I mean, it's hard to call a BuzzFeed article satisfying, but at least it doesn't trick you any more than you're used to being tricked into reading it, you know.
Yeah, it says on its, face, this is buzz in your feed. It's a thing that we do. And you're like, okay, this is going to be 2 paragraphs on why this dog can do backflips at a roller skating rink.
Right. You read that article? It's a pretty interesting article, actually. I
was particularly impressed when they were able to keep the roller skates on the dog, but that's beyond the point.
Yeah. That's some engineering.
Can we address one other thing real quick?
Sure.
That the chapters are not singular topics.
No, they're not.
We covered it a little bit with the gladiator thing because it's gladiators and pro wrestling because it's drawing parallels. Okay, so you're like, okay, that's fine. You're using a device to illustrate your point and show how people are kind of still people. Shock and alarm.
Right.
But then you've got the end of the world covers like 6 different circumstances where people predicted the end of the world. They talk about the Mayan calendar. They talk about general lunatics. They talk about Isaac Newton. They talk about the Christian book guy from the 80s. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, okay, yeah, by the way, a lot of people have predicted the end of the world.
Yeah. It hasn't happened yet.
I'm honestly kind of surprised. I guess because it was fiction, they didn't discuss the Left Behind series. I know that, what's his name? Dan Brown comes up in the later discussion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Dan Brown, as much as you may or may not like him, does become sort of a particular kicking horse here.
Yeah. Okay, so Chapter 1, protective coloring. Chapter 2, a variety of world-ending predictions. Oh, was Y2K mentioned? I don't know.
It's in here somewhere. It's in the book. I don't know if it was mentioned in that section particularly.
Do they actually have 2 chapters called pseudo-archaeology? And one just for the pun?
Could be.
Excuse me while I skim through the chapter titles, not their subtitles.
No.
They like the word fake and pseudo.
Oh, you do have 2 for pseudo-archaeology.
Because you have pseudo-archaeology, the actual word, and then chapter 3, which is pseudo-archaeology with ARK, because they're talking about Noah's Ark. I don't really want to dwell on this, but these people seem to have a massive issue with Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
There are reasons to have that, but this was not handled. It
seemed arbitrary, didn't it?
Yeah, and it was not handled in a professional way. It was just like, haha, let's crap on this. And, it got old.
There are ways to do it, and there are ways not to do it, and they picked the way not to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it just seemed kind of... The whole book felt very to a point, to an opinionated, we have an idea, and this is the idea we want you to agree with us or understand by the end of the book.
Yeah.
Which meant that instead of reading facts or getting context or learning things, you're reading that this guy thinks it's because of this that people are like the way they are.
Right. And he doesn't... I wouldn't necessarily say this is a big deal in and of itself, but he does not do that with any of the other potential targets in the book to which he could do that.
Okay, I'm going to say this, as a Christian, I'm glad that you said that, because I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to be sensitive, like just be it's because he's attacking my worldview. Okay, I feel a little better. Future Brian can cut that if he wants, but thank you for making that point. Okay, so the Ark is an example of kind of... the Ark had some potentially very interesting information because it brought up the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it talked about Noah's flood, and then it talked like, oh yeah, all of these other people have this flood myth. But again, it just fails to be satisfying because it talks about that, and then it talks about the people who fake found the Ark and the people who made the Ark, and that goes back to all Christians are charlatans, basically. So it's like they're on the cusp of doing things that are very interesting, and then kind of...
Well, that's kind of the overall feel of the entire book, is that we have come... Here is the interesting bit of information. We are going to give you exactly one sentence on it, and we are going to go away and never mention it again. It's like, that's not what I'm looking for, guys. I'm looking for a discussion of the interesting bit of information. There's a parallel to be drawn here between the chapters in the book and episodes of, for example, GM Word of the Week. Okay? In that, while they may have done research that led them to the interesting bits, they did not then develop the interesting bits into anything. Whereas I believe it to be true, at least, that in like GM Word of the Week, we get to the interesting bit and then we talk about the interesting bit for a little while.
To be fair, most of the show is the interesting bit.
Yeah.
I would say, even in the most meandering episodes, you guys hit mostly like 60% on topic or on an interesting topic, and then you've got all your connections and your tendons that are pulling things together. But, yeah.
This book just never develops any of that beyond just the barest mention of things. You know, it feels like half a book.
There you go. And actually, speaking of which, I kind of I really hate crapping on books this much. I really do, because I know that so many people worked their hearts out to make this a beautiful publication and everything. And I feel like the authors kind of half-heartedly provided the text.
Right.
Like, you know, the book is 50 chapters.
Yes.
I feel like it probably could have been 40 and been more satisfying.
Yeah. Probably.
Because then you could pull out things like the end of the world as we know it, the evolution of the con. Let's see, what's another good one? Fake journalism, which was a discussion of how fake journalism happens, not an actual discussion really of topics, which you would think...
It has nothing to do with the current discussion about fake news. It's more about how news can be faked, or how it has previously been faked, or how the news that was presented wasn't really news that was presented. It was, made up, or was, was made to serve a purpose, or was taken from other places, or, that kind of stuff.
It's funny because, we were complaining about how they didn't tell us how some of these hoaxes were perpetrated in any satisfying way. But I would say that in fake journalism, they actually discuss the perpetration, but still without any body or depth to the conversation about it. Everything seems very kind of... Okay, these men, I believe they're both men, Ian and Peter, respect to
like
however they identify, but they are living in their heads in a dystopian world. There is no hope in this book, and there doesn't have to be a hope in books. That is a worldview thing. But they're not even like presenting these as a warning or anything. They're just saying, here, look at how stupid humanity is, or look at how these people suck. Except for like a handful of chapters which are clever or interesting or led to something good for someone. It was kind of depressing to finish.
Yeah, kind of.
I'm a very sponge-like reader, though. Like, I absorb a lot of the emotions of things that I'm reading, and that's what I felt like when I finished this book. I was like, wow, these guys seem to think everything is just kind of pointless. They didn't even have fun with their topic. And how can you not have fun with this topic?
I don't know. This seems like a topic that's rife for amusement.
Or at least intrigue.
It's not handled that way.
Okay, so we talked about gladiators. Let's keep skimming through forward.
Alrighty.
Here's one that I had no context for, which I thought was moderately interesting, if handled in an unsatisfying way. The Julian Purpose, Chapter 5, Selling Empires. Oh, we started talking about the time frame and then kind of got completely sidelined. Sorry. But this is the story of how guards, were they guards? Yeah, sold the empire, basically, and people tried to buy it, and like a couple of people tried. It just was like, it was just so flat.
It's just people selling things they don't actually own. In this case, the Roman Empire.
You know what could have been a lot more fun than the way this book was presented? If they just fictionalized it and just took these different instances and told stories about what was going on. There's no story to this. It's just a regurgitation of information and opinion in no meaningful consistency.
It's a recitation of facts, and more often than not. Chapter 6 is the Loch Ness Monster.
Which doesn't supply any new or interesting information.
Well, in fact, it leaves out a lot of interesting information. Because when I was a child, one of the things I read on those summer reading programs was a lot of stuff on cryptozoology. So like, Bigfoot and the Yeti and Loch Ness Monster and whatever. It was just interesting as a kid, 9, 10, 11 years old.
Seems fair. I mean, it's interesting to me as an adult.
Yeah, I really kind of dug into all that and read a bunch of stuff and everything. And so I happen to know, just because of all that their Loch Ness Monster chapter is very thin on the ground in terms of things it could be discussing as being fakes or being a hoax or whatever. There's a lot of things they chose not to cover.
They don't even have the famous picture, do they?
Nope. Not at all. And that is that. If you're going to cover hoaxes, that is the one you cover.
Yeah,
for the Loch Ness Monster, because that's the one that had the biggest impact. You know, you think you would talk about that at some length, but no. Instead, we talk about how there is a movie prop at the bottom of Loch Ness.
I thought that was pretty funny, actually.
Which is interesting. I'll grant you that is interesting. That is amusing. Okay, fine, great. Doesn't really add to the hoax.
No, I think that one of their problems was they're trying to maintain a consistent chapter length, or a relatively consistent chapter length. And in doing so, they had to pad some things, and they had to gut other things. I feel like the Loch Ness Monster was definitely a victim of the gut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The famous photograph, the one everybody knows about in the Loch Ness Monster, gets exactly one sentence, which says that the photograph was taken on November 12th, 1933. That's it. They don't tell you anything else about it. I don't know. It's a very cursory, very thin examination of all these various topics.
Okay, so I'm actually gonna run through backstory.
Okay.
Everybody play your flashback music real quick. In college, when I was in college for things about books and words, I found that I needed to take a history course because I was at a liberal arts college, so you've got your gen eds. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a Civil War course. How cool would it be to learn more in depth about the Civil War? Because you know what you get in high school and whatnot is just that, okay, we're now spending 3 weeks on the Civil War. We're going to teach you the same 18 facts that everybody knows, and we're going to move forward. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is my chance. This is my chance to learn more than I have before. This is going to be so awesome. I get into the class, and the first day, the teacher looks at us, and he kind of sets his hands down. And this is his favorite thing. He's an American history teacher, and everything else, like 75% of everything else he teaches is world history gen eds for people that don't even want to be in the room. So he is like stoked to be leading this class. And he looks at us and he says, now, I know you've all learned about the Civil War. And I'm like, yeah, okay, what are we going to learn that's new and different? Well, I'm not going to teach you about the history. Instead, I'm going to teach you about how we've looked at the history. And it turned into a course of basically, I want to say the word is historiography, which is basically literary criticism, but for history. Mm. And so we learned to look at the lenses through which we viewed the Civil War without actually absorbing any more information specifically about the history of the Civil War. That's what this book feels like to me. It feels like just so close to being what I want without making it.
Did you enjoy that class?
I ended up enjoying a fair amount of it, partially because of some of the assigned reading. Because we were supposed to read historical sources and then modern sources regarding said historical sources. So there was some learning of the Civil War, but the overarching course was saying, okay, look at how this guy talked about it as a Northerner, this guy talked about it as a Southerner. You know, look where the apologists are.
Yeah.
And I think my paper, I wrote a paper, I want to say it was about the newspapers of the time. That was what my big paper for the class was. And I got to buy a couple of really cool source books for that. So that was nice. And but it was not what I wanted.
Okay.
And I was a little irritated that
fair enough.
That the description of the course did not lead me to believe more accurately about its contents. I vote we skip the next chapter.
Okay, we'll skip the one on the relics.
Which, yes, it's a discussion of Christian religious relics, because obviously we're the only ones that ever faked them.
Right.
And, you know, Christians are perfect and not just people trying to live a better life. I'm not going to go into this. We're going to move on to Pope Joan. Wait.
Oh, yeah, that's cleared that right up. Thanks. Okay, So in brief, Pope Joan was a woman who masqueraded as a man, became Pope of the Catholic Church, and was not discovered until, oopsie, there's a baby.
Well, she's riding a horse, wasn't it?
Yes. And so now there's a special chair for checking to make sure your Pope is indeed male. Congratulations. That's that.
Sorry. I tried to skip ahead, and I ended up with the picture of the chair.
Then we can have the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, which they've already discussed fake relics.
Yeah, fake relics over on the other side. No, we got to have this one. And I get it. I get that these at least the Shroud of Turin is a big one, you know.
Yeah.
It was a big deal for a long time. I understand that. Okay? But I don't wish to take sides one way or the other, but I feel like there are a lot of other things that can be discussed as well under that same heading of, you know, either fake relics or different belief systems that have produced things that, you know, are of questionable or dubious authenticity, you know, that kind of stuff.
I'm inclined to agree.
It hasn't been done. It hasn't been done really in the book anywhere.
I was about to say the Shroud of Turin is the big one. So I understand that you needed to include the Shroud of Turin, but the previous chapter could have been something, well, not the previous, could have been something else. So that you didn't cover, because then you could cursorily cover all of these others. Like, so let's talk about relics. The Shroud of Turin's a big one. Here's a couple of others, but let's talk about the big one, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just...
Then we go. There's a lot of stuff on fakes here in the middle, in the early middle of the book. You've got Michelangelo's Cupid.
Which I think that counts more as a hoax than other things.
Yeah, yeah.
Same with,
You've got statues, yeah.
I want you to do me a favor when we get there.
Okay.
I want you to say the name of chapter 11.
Okay.
And its subtitle.
Okay. So chapter 11 is Fraudulent Ethnicity, AD 1703. And the full title of the chapter is Salmanazar.
Yes, I went
Salmanazar. Yeah.
And this was...
Or Salmanazar. You could do that way, too.
Anyway. No. Salmanazar.
Salmanazar. Yeah, or Nazar, or Salmanazar. Or...
Well, I like Salmanazar. And since he was masquerading as...
The point being...
I'm sorry.
This guy, Solly, this guy invented an entire ethnicity for himself that just didn't even exist in the world, and managed to convince a number of authoritative people that he was, in fact, a true member of society they knew nothing about.
Blonde hair, blue-eyed, coming from the area of today's Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, this one is actually one of the most legitimate chapters in the book.
Right. It's, I mean, you can see the hoax. You can see, yes, this was definitely intended as a hoax, you know, and you can sort of see the workings of it, and you can watch the guy sort of take advantage of the credulity of various people.
Lots of people. And he did a really good job of it. He came up with an alphabet and like
very thorough
religions. And when people tried to call him on it, he made up more crap.
That's right. He was a genuine liar, fibbing his way through very successfully, it has to be said.
A lot of fancy dinner parties.
Yep.
Also managing to explain away the fact that he was quite clearly Caucasian.
Yeah. Yeah. He really the only reason he got found out or caught or anything like that was because eventually the tide of discovery and progress caught up with him. You know, that as more about the world was learned, it was like, oh, wait a minute, some of this doesn't make sense. It doesn't jive with what we know now. You know. But that's okay.
But that's okay, Brian, because people will be fooled again.
Mm-hmm.
because people are dumb.
And again. Because humans are gullible. And stupid. Thomas Chatterton, The Romantic Suicide. I don't even really understand how this is a hoax necessarily.
Well, this is the young man who wrote the poetry and said it was from a different time, wasn't it?
Yeah, he wrote poetry and then claimed it was from a fellow named Thomas Rowley, a 15th century Bristol monk. But it's not really. Okay, the guy he's pretending all the poems are from didn't exist. And I'm not aware that Chatterton ever claimed he did actually exist.
I think the hoax, it's just that the deception of saying, look what I found, not what I wrote, which is a theme that actually comes back a couple of times. But half the chapter isn't about that.
But yeah, no, half the chapter is not about that. But I would argue the point that is just the framework in which the poetry was presented. Okay, lots of authors write books and do poetry claiming to be from a source that they are not.
As referenced.
As part of the story itself. Okay? I will point you at The Princess Bride.
Which is ridiculous. But
supposedly,
I like it.
Supposedly written by S. Morgenstern and then pared down by Mr. Golding. The Good Bits version, you'll remember.
Yeah. Where you don't have to read pages upon pages about wardrobes.
Yes, exactly.
The clothing, not the thing clothing is kept in.
Yeah. So Golding wrote this book under the presumption that S. Morgenstern had written the book as well, and this was like the abridged version. But it's all Golding's work. But the framework he's presenting it in is this S. Morgenstern in the times, that he lived in and that kind of stuff. That this was a theoretically somewhat embellished actual true story. Okay? I don't see that that's any different than what Chatterton has done here by saying these poems he wrote were actually written by this monk in the 15th century. It's part of the presentation and part of the framework. I do not think that qualifies as any sort of a hoax.
I'm debating as to how I should reply, because I understand your direction, but the thing about Golding was he knew what he was doing from the get-go. And I think because his was slightly more outrageous, I would be willing to say, no, he doesn't count as a hoax. That's just, this is how I'm choosing to tell my story. But Chatterton was using, and along with the other people that will come up in the book later, were using that source as a source of legitimacy as well. So, he wasn't a legitimate writer. He was a finder. Whereas I don't...
Right, but the social systems in place at the time prevented him from being considered even as somebody who could write and create these works.
Yes, because he was just some dumb kid.
Mm-hmm. So I think it was a necessary fiction for him to get his work out there. And I don't think that qualifies as a fraud. That qualifies as finding a way around the system.
I think a lot of things could be considered as finding a way around the system.
Well, it's an interesting point for the rest of this.
I'm willing to accept this is a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
But this still doesn't explain why half the chapter ends up being about the fact that he screwed up and got screwed over by the system and ended up killing himself.
Right. Maybe he faked that. Maybe it was actually a 15th century monk that killed himself.
Point being, it kind of just, I don't know. I don't think they were I don't think the authors had a specific shape for the chapters in mind. They just had ideas and moved forward.
Yeah, but The one reasonable point they have in here, the one point they have in their favor for Chatterton, is that it is where the myth of the starving artist came from.
The romantic image.
Yes, and so all artists, writers, sculptors, etc., anybody engaged in art is therefore necessarily a struggling, starving artist who can just barely get by. And that is a myth that hangs with us today.
Yes, it is. And the fact that being a starving artist, starving for your art, is the way to make good art.
Yeah, it's noble. Anyway, the next chapter
is legit.
Counterfeit wine, Thomas Jefferson's Lafitte. Is that how you would say that?
Yes, but I am ignorant of the languages, so.
Oh, awesome.
I'm ugly American.
Great. We'll butcher something along the way then. Basically, some guy faked a bunch of wine that he claimed was Thomas Jefferson's. Okay, thank you. And nobody figured it out for a long time.
This was also covered in an episode of Leverage. I don't know the specific example, but all of the science behind it was. So, that one's on me for not learning anything because I have that specific source in my mind. I know.
Yeah.
You can't hear me shrug when I'm doing it.
Yeah, I know. Oh. Basically, it amounts to the fact that what he's really digging at here, I think, is more the fact that there's supposedly all these refined tastes that people have developed to distinguish the good and genuine from the poor and poor and false, whatever you want to call it, the substandard stuff, and really, a number of people are incapable of doing that and really shouldn't be relied on.
Well, it kind of goes back to the humans, what a bunch of losers, kind of feel of the book. But here's the thing. I kind of found a way to put I forgot how to use words and my speaking abilities. So if you give me just a moment. Okay, so I think I figured out my first and biggest hiccup with this book. It goes back to the title, because when I think of a hoax, I think of something big and flashy and press related. The Piltdown Man. Kind of a big honkin' deal, and I don't think of these forgeries as hoaxes. I think of them as forgeries.
Yeah, a basic lie.
Yeah, a quiet little thing to make somebody money. Not, I guess it's, to me, hoaxes need more scale. And yes, okay, faking Thomas Jefferson's wine, big deal. To the vintners, to the wine drinkers, to the Thomas Jeff and his top.
Yeah.
To them.
Right.
I'll even give them the Noah's Ark. People saying they found the Ark. I concede that as a hoax, but these little lies that are just private little ways to pull the wool over someone's specific eyes or to make their money, that just falls flat when having the word hoax applied. So you guys might get more mileage out of this book if you just pull that out of your head right there. Just expect it all to be about people lying.
Let's talk about what you thought was the best one in here, or the most interesting, or whatever criteria you used to pick the best of the batch.
Well, my favorite stories I don't count as hoaxes, because there are two stories that are, again, about artists passing off their product as other than it is. Well, one is an artist passing off product, the other is the artist passing off himself. And they're the two music chapters, the Fritz.
Oh, that guy?
I'm so sorry.
Fritz Chrysler? Chrysler, whichever.
Is he German?
Sure, go with that.
I'm going to go with Chrysler, just because I feel like that's the EI in that. Feel free to correct me. I just ask that you do so with kindness in your heart, because this is a voice of ignorance, not willful ignorance. Thank you. But so he's composed all this music and presented all this music as from the greats because, like Chatterton, he couldn't say, "Look what I did." You know? Mm-hmm. So he did this, and in a way, that makes his gift even more astonishing because he specifically produced products that pieces that could be passed off as works done by these immensely famous and well-known composers. Like, there is something to be said for somebody who can create something from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also something to be said for someone who can pick up the mimicry and the rhythms of somebody else's artwork. It's not always favorable, but it's still very impressive. And I like that he did eventually get recognized for his natural gift.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was cool. And then the other one, Korla Pandit.
Yes.
Was a gentleman who pretended to be Indian and played the organ on television.
Yeah.
And he was just a gifted musician who wore a costume and stared mesmerizingly into the screen.
This is what bothers me about this whole book. If you go to Korla Pandit and you look at the picture and then read the caption, it says Korla Pandit was a con man in that he wasn't who he said he was, yet he wasn't trying to cheat his audience out of anything. Quite the opposite, he was offering them the gift of music, the universal language of love.
So they just wrote off the reason for including him in the book.
Exactly. And I feel like that applies to more than one person in here. You know.
I would like to point out that it does kind of suck that this man had to live this way because of his race. That is awful. But
and that was my earlier point, is that these really aren't being done as cons. They're being done because that's the way they were sadly forced to do things in order to get the recognition that in most cases they deserved. You know?
Mm-hmm. And there are legitimate hoaxes. There's just not enough of them to justify the title of the book.
Yeah. But you know, like you, I'm Fritz Kreisler is my favorite one in the whole thing. Because to me, it's a story about a guy who knew exactly what he was and knew how good he was, but for one reason or another couldn't get anybody else to acknowledge that fact, you know? And the sad part is that they then interrupt this with the story of Milli Vanilli, which were essentially two people who were conning people into thinking they were musicians when they were, in fact, not.
They were, in fact, performers.
Yes, just performers.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
The lie behind it.
They didn't present themselves.
Yeah, the lie behind it is there.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, they didn't find a place to perform, so they made one with a lie, and then they got caught in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel like even that doesn't count as a hoax, because the point isn't to fool people. The point is to become famous. It's like, I feel like...
Well, yeah, but in order to do that, you have to present yourself as having skills you do not.
Yeah.
Which I think does tend to lean it into the hoax realm.
Yeah. I can't draw the line.
Yeah, it's just not very interestingly done in the book.
Okay, there's got to be some more legitimate hoaxes that we can include here.
Really? You think so?
Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe. Tell us about Edgar Allan Poe.
And the balloon. Basically, Edgar Allan Poe was being a journalist, and he related the story of a hot air balloon that was across the sea in 3 days.
Sure.
it ended up being found out to be a lie, and was possibly done because he wanted to ruin people related to the paper. Also, I believe he was drunk.
That seems like a bad idea.
Well,
that seems like a bad idea that got out of hand. Bad idea.
And I think that counts pretty... I mean, you know, it was a presentation of a story that was a complete fallacy.
Sure.
Designed for sensationalism. Like, this is like... That is the embodiment of a hoax to me. It was there to fool people, not necessarily to achieve anything.
Right.
In this case, it was there to fool people and make somebody look bad.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. Is that in order to be a genuine, intentional hoax, there has to be somebody on the other end of it that comes out looking bad or has some sort of harm done to them. Whether that's, you know, and that doesn't speak to the degree of harm or anything like that. Which is why I think Chatterton and a few others in here don't really meet the criteria of a hoax. They haven't done any harm to anyone. I
think... So there's some more traditional ones. There's Bigfoot's mentioned. We've got the faked pictures, the ladies and their fairies, and propaganda. Actually, they've got some propaganda in here.
Yeah.
Which I guess that word didn't make it onto the cover because it doesn't start with an F.
Fair enough.
Spiritualism. Again, this one was dealt with very surface and was very disappointing. If you guys want to learn more about interesting spiritualism movements, I would actually suggest you listen to Lore. He does several episodes regarding people that were found out to be fakes and hoaxes, and people that were never proven otherwise. You know what I was expecting in here, which I shouldn't have been from the title, but I was more and more considering the content, was the story of the guy who sold the bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, he sold how many, like, buildings and whatnot? I think he was eventually caught for selling Grant's tomb.
Yeah.
Like, I expected him to be in here. I don't think he even gets a mention. Ponzi does.
It's, yeah, it's hard to decide what their criteria was for what made it in and what didn't.
I think it goes back to the number 50. They're like, okay, we need to have a nice round number of chapters.
Yeah.
50 sounds good. Okay. So if we want to make it a 200 and some odd page book, you know, we can give it X amount of pages. We'll have a preface and an afterword, have pages with artwork. Yeah, we can do this.
Sure.
Nice round numbers.
Yeah, it just, I don't know, I feel like this book could have been done much more thoroughly and much better than has been done, even just covering the exact same things.
Or you know, cutting the chapters down and just expanding certain chapters. And take away all of the... By the way, we're going to tell you that we're going to put our opinion in here about how it's so sad that humans are pathetic and gullible. It's amazing how we're still falling for this stuff, etc. Oh, isn't it funny how humans desperately need to understand things, so they make up stories and choose to believe them in spite of facts? That's another recurring theme. Oh, here we go. That human powerlessness to accomplish everything we can imagine almost inevitably leads to a state of existential dissatisfaction. That would be a sentence from the afterword. The epilogue, sorry. Which is
See, you know, the rest of that paragraph is interesting, so I'm going to read it.
Okay, I'll sit here and listen.
This is Ian Tattersall himself, I guess. It says, so I'm going to read your bit and read the whole paragraph, actually. That human powerlessness to accomplish everything we can imagine almost inevitably leads to a state of existential dissatisfaction. If we wish to achieve contentment we have only two choices. We can either accept our limitations and leave our unachievable aspirations safely stowed away while acting on those we feel attainable, or we can use our powers of imagination to rely on snake oil, promised lands, fleeting fame, revolution, conspiracy theories, or lying politicians to provide temporary relief. The fraudsters will always have a niche, so let us hope it will never be more than that.
Okay, I just want to add one more sentence real quick. The first sentence of the next paragraph. To end this book on what we hope will be a high note, we will repeat that not all fraud ultimately detracts from the general quality of life. So, what do you get from this whole conversation here?
I get that they have a problem. I get that the problem they have is they don't actually know why or how to do anything. Look, okay, so on one hand, there are only two choices according to this. One is to just remember that you are a very limited creature and don't attempt anything you don't already think you can do. Or go ahead and buy into all the people who are trying to trick you. And those are not the only two choices.
No, those are the two choices that keep you living in a state of despair.
Mm-hmm.
Like even saying, not all lies are bad. Like not all lies hurt people. Doesn't really absolve you of having said that lies are the only way to make life bearable.
No. It's that. Yeah, they go on with that whole thing, and it's like, and not all fraud is bad. Not all lies are bad. Some of them are actually good and help you deal with things and improve your general quality of life, etc., etc., etc. So only engage in things you don't already think you can do if it's going to add to the general overall happiness feeling. I don't know. I think these guys don't know what book they wrote.
I told you this book was depressing.
Yes.
Like, I legitimately closed the book and I'm like, I need to go read something happy now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have once again put people through a book I would not myself willingly have read had I known what it was going to be like ahead of time. Okay, this is the second time I have made that error. I feel like I should not be allowed to pick books anymore. You
had help on the first one because Scott was on board for Imagination, Empires of the Imagination.
Right.
So that one you can't completely accept. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of expected if you think about it, like given the genre that has brought this particular group together.
Our general area of interests. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing about the Hoax book? So they tell you in the beginning of the book when they're talking to you about, how despairing and hopeless humanity is and what idiots we all are. I'm paraphrasing and possibly editorializing.
Right.
They tell you in the beginning, we put a little piece of fraud, a little baby hoax in this book, and we hope that you can find it. And then the very last paragraph, which I did not read all of, I just read that first sentence, tells you what that lie is.
Right.
And it's not actually,
no.
The fraudulence that they perpetrated upon us intentionally was a piece of obscure information that unless you're going to do all of the research they did, you're going to have no reason to know.
No.
So
there's no clue that this is the hoax at all.
There's no reason to suspect that it is a lie.
We hope you spotted it, but if by chance you didn't, check the Pep's quote on page 44. We made a tiny addition to account for his activities on December 6, 1665. The Duke did not show him Michelangelo's much lamented Cupid. As far as is known, it remained in Whitehall Palace until it was incinerated in the fire of 1698. Okay. Did you spot that when you read through the first time?
You know what? I didn't.
That's weird.
The only hoax I spotted probably couldn't be called a hoax because it wasn't intentional. And that would be the entire book. I will say this, though. They have an extensive further reading list.
Yes.
And I can basically guarantee all of those books will do a better job
Yeah,
of
you would
being
think
what
so.
they want to be.
Yeah, it has many and numerous flaws of varying quality, and it's not that great. How many Goodreads stars did you give it?
I think I ended up deciding to do 2 because while I'm not happy for having read it, I can't technically say that I regret the time I spent because it wasn't a hard read.
Right.
And I learned a couple of things, not nearly as many as I would hope from a book this size or this cost. And I learned actually a bunch of new words. Don't ask me what any of them are right now. I cannot remember.
Mm-hmm.
But, I enjoy books that make me look up words. That's fun. And like I said, it is a phenomenally well-made book, physically.
I gave
their graphic artist was great.
Yeah, that's good.
it's like saying, well, that's nice, but I feel I hate.
That's a lovely package you have on that pile of poo.
Got a nice polish.
Yeah, I also gave it 2 stars, and for reasons cited, I'm not terribly pleased with the book itself. I feel like it's maybe attempted to point me at things that might be interesting to actually read about further, but has not really encouraged me to do that reading.
That's fair. I think one of the main reasons I gave it 2 stars is because I will not read it again. But people that are not me, that don't follow random trivia content, might enjoy it.
They might.
Or people that just like having their
anything.
concept of hope crapped on. They might enjoy it too.
Yeah. People who have never ever heard of anything in this book before, this will be brilliant for them.
And you know what? Hopefully it will be brilliant for them, and it'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know people could fake photographs back then. And they'll do further reading, and they will expand their palette because the book was so unsatisfying.
Right.
That was really mean.
I've had a really bad hamburger, and now I'm angry and going to go find a good one.
Well, sure, people work that way.
Yes.
I'm sorry, what were you saying there?
I don't know. I was going to say that given that I have such a terrible track record of picking books myself, I have decided to throw you under the bus this time and make you pick our next read.
Okay. I'm gonna only... Yeah, you know what I'm gonna do, Brian?
You're going to equivocate first, and then you're going to tell us what it is.
I'm going to say I'm dragging you under the bus with me because you gave me a selection to pick from.
Suggested by our readers, or by our listeners.
Okay, so everybody's under the bus with me. It's an under the bus party. And we are looking at... Hold on, I've got to look up the whole title. It's not a brief title. It's about a vampire, though. But it's not Twilight.
Oh.
I could think of decent vampire books. Dracula being one. Dracula's very good. Not everybody likes epistolary novels, but I will recommend it to those at large. That is not what we're reading. We are reading The Utterly Uninteresting and Unadventurous Tales of Fred, the Vampire Accountant by Drew Hayes.
And what led you to choose this particular book?
Of the handful I had been given as a list, the others didn't sound like... They sounded like books, you know? Like, okay, that's a book, it might be interesting. But this one at least sounded moderately off the beaten path, I guess. I mean, I'm always suspicious of things that automatically call themselves uninteresting. I'm like, okay, that means it's either going to be, you know, Fred's Day in Hell, which is appropriate since he's a vampire, or wacky things happen. But it's a vampire accountant. And the notion just tickled me. Also, I enjoy the name Fred.
Okay.
If you want, I can read the blurb, but
you go ahead and read the blurb. Let's hear what you got.
All right. Some people are born boring. Some live boring. Some even die boring. Fred managed to do all three, and when he woke up as a vampire, he did so as a boring one. Timid, socially awkward, and plagued by self-esteem issues, Fred has never been the adventurous sort. One fateful night, different from the night he died, which was more inconvenient than fateful, Fred reconnects with an old friend at his high school reunion. This rekindled relationship sets off a chain of events, thrusting him right into the chaos that is the parahuman world. A world with chipper zombies, truck driver wereponies, maniacal necromancers, ancient dragons, and now one undead accountant trying his best to survive. Because even after it's over, life can still be a downright bloody mess. Wereponies might have also had something to do with my decision.
Might have, huh?
And now we've made good on your show's title.
Good.
We've digressed, and there's been reference to dragons. Score. We're not a hoax this time.
All right, then. So yours is already on the way. Mine has already arrived. I guess people had better get reading it before we're out of time.